Hello, we're here to do the Zadie jumpsuit today, which is a really nice wee pattern. It's quite a loose fitting pattern. The sizes are quite big actually, but that's kind of more to do with the style of it. A couple of different options. There's a long sleeve, there's just the normal wee short sleeve as well. I have made mine shorter in the leg because I believe this is for a 5'7" person. I am not 5'7". I am 5 foot tall, so I made it shorter. It's a fairly simple pattern, not too difficult, and there is a 1 centimetre seam allowance. So these are all the things we need to consider. So I will stick to the rules and I will follow the instructions and not go off piste like I normally do. Okay. And I will also put my phone on silent.
Yep, I'm professional.
You guys don't have to put your phones on silent, but I'll put mine on silent because that is unprofessional for me. Right, so fabric wise, I've got a linen viscose mix that I dyed myself.
Okay.
Let me find it. It's like,
oh, peachy.
It's actually not, it didn't work amazingly. I've got a dye, I didn't have enough salt, I used dishwasher salt. I don't know if it worked, but it kind of went, then I was mixing it in a Tupperware dish, then I realised the Tupperware dish had a hole in it and it started to leak this wild orange dye all over my kitchen counter. So then I panicked and just chucked it all in the machine and it's gone a little bit blotchy, but I'm just going to pretend I meant it. It's like a little bit tie-dye-esque.
Yeah, you can't see too much, so...
Right. It'll be, I'm just going to roll with it, it's totally fine. So have you snipped in the wee notches on the pieces?
No, but I've got them on it,
so in some patterns the notches look like triangles, but in this they're like
wee buckets.
Yeah, they are the little bits like that. So you want to snip them. Because the seam allowance is 1 centimetre, you don't want to go further than 1 centimetre because then coming out to the outside. So I would only snip in by like 5 millimetres, not very much at all.
Okay.
So first step is join the back with the back. I don't know why this wasn't cut and fold. If I was doing this again, I'd probably cut it on the fold. So you can take your pattern piece off the back body. And if you are using a fabric like mine that doesn't have a right side and a wrong side, what you might want to do is put a wee chalk mark or something on your wrong side so you know which is which. It can make life a bit easier later on. Okay. So I'm going to do a stitch along this back edge here with a 1 centimetre seam allowance, nice wee straight stitch.
And that's because you've done it as a...
Yeah, so if you cut it on the fold.
Yeah.
So because if you've cut it on the fold, the only issue that you might have, I think, it might be okay. If you'd cut it on the fold and we had, say there was a collar or a set piece of facing or something that went in the inside, you'd find that the facing wouldn't fit because what they factored in here is a centimetre seam allowance.
Right, so they're just cutting it down the middle and then...
I think you'd be okay because that neckline doesn't actually have to fit. So the neckline doesn't have to fit into anything, but the bottom does. So I think you might be better just cutting it.
Sit down the middle where I've done the seam.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just
and then we use that as I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Are you going rogue in this?
No.
No? Maybe you said that you hadn't done the, what do you call it?
And we're back.
Okay.
Right, I've got another camera. So I'll be doing a wee reverse at the start and at the end, a wee back tack.
Okay. Oh.
Okay. And then your next step, it wants you to overlock this edge. Now, it doesn't tell you to overlock them individually, so I'm just going to overlock or zigzag. A zigzag stitch does the same thing. If you're zigzagging, you want one side of the zigzags to ever so slightly come off the edge of the fabric. I'll show you that in this other camera. So if you're zigzagging, one side of the stitch comes off the edge of the fabric. You would put it onto a zigzag on your machine. Your stitch width would be about 5, so it's nice and wide, and your stitch length would be about 2. Okay, so flip your back piece now. I've given this a very quick press. I know it doesn't look like it. I didn't really wait for the iron to get that hot, to be fair. But my seam's in there. Have you zigzagged your raw edge?
No, but I can do that. That's fine.
So if you zigzag your raw edge, and then what we'll be doing is we'll be finding, in fact, you could do that in a minute. You can do this bit now if you like. There's not 2 notches here are where they're the pleat marks. And if you bring those notches together, I'm pinching them wrong sides together.
So down and then pinch them both together.
Pinch, yep. So just one side at a time.
Yeah.
And then I'm just going to pop a wee pin in that.
Okay. Why is that?
Because then it gets pushed towards the outside seam.
Okay.
Push like that, and then we'll be doing a wee basting stitch, a wee temporary stitch to keep it in place along this bottom edge here. Okay. So I'm actually going to just pin it that way once I've got that pleat in place.
Just pleating through. Okay.
And then I'm going to do the same on this side here. So pinching it. Put a wee pin in. Pushing it towards the side seam. Like that. So I should have 2 wee pleats in the back. A basting stitch is just a normal straight stitch, but it's long. So you want to put the length, which on the L on a 340 is the bottom dial, put it to 4.
Okay.
And then ideally you'd want to stitch within the seam allowance here. So you probably want to stitch in about 5 millimeters so that we don't have to unpick this later. So just a wee stitch there and a wee stitch there. Okay. And you can do your zigzag as well.
Yeah.
After.
So just 5 millimeters.
Yep. Okay, so that's a little basting stitch. So they are tacked in place. You can hardly even see them, but there's 2 pleats there.
Yep.
And we're going to do the same with the pleats on the front piece. So grab your front pattern piece.
So I think the front body is one of the ones I've not got cut yet.
Okay, that's fine.
Leg, sleeve, not front body, but I'll cut off if you're talking, that's fine.
Okay, no probs. The pleat gets done in exactly the same way anyway.
Okay. There's nothing really different about it then.
No.
I wonder why, you know, they're different.
Right, so on your front piece, again, if you've got, if you don't have an obvious right side and wrong side, be aware and make sure that what you're doing here is a mirror image of each other. You don't want two right fronts or two left fronts here, so just be aware of that. And then we're going to find your, so they're here. There's two little notches here for your pleats. Grab them, put them together. Wrong sides together. We pin in there. And then again, they're getting pushed towards your side seam. So I'm going to push it that way. And then I'm going to stick a wee pin in there and baste over that again. So that's one.
And they only need to be kind of small creases.
Yeah, they're just wee. Just a wee pleat for a bit of shape.
Yeah.
So again, with a basting stitch, I'm just going to sew over this pleat to keep it in place about 5 millimeters from my edge.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay, so I've got the pleats done in my two front pieces here.
Okay.
I've got the pleats done in my back pieces, and now I'm going to take my back piece, put it down in front of me, right side up, and then I'm going to place my front pieces down on top. And I'm matching my shoulder seams. So the next seam that we want to stitch is along our shoulders there.
Okay.
And there. So I'll be stitching that wee bit. And I'll be stitching that wee bit. 1 centimetre seam allowance again.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so now I've stitched both my shoulder seams with a 1 centimetre seam allowance, and now I'm just going to overlock or zigzag that raw edge there, so we're just overlocking them together.
Just the shoulder.
Okay, so we've done our shoulder seams, we have overlocked our raw edge, and if you're doing a sleeve, I'm going to show you how to put the sleeve in now. I'm not doing the sleeve, but it's very easy to put in, so I'll show you and then I won't put it in, but I will refer to it later on in case you do want to put it in. So your sleeve has got a notch at the top, it's got 1 notch to one side and it's got 2 notches to another side over here. 2 notches is always the back, 1 notch is always the front of the garment, and there's normally a notch in the centre that matches up with your shoulder seam. So open up your top part here. So here's my shoulder seam, and here's like my underarm bit and my other underarms up here. I've got 2 notches here because that's my back. I've got 1 notch there, it's tiny, but it does exist because that's my front. So I'm going to place this down right sides together, and I'm going to match my notches. So raw edge of my sleeve to the raw edge of my top here. I'm matching that notch to the shoulder seam. Matching those two notches together there. It's a very easy sleeve to put in. You'd be delighted to know. Some people are terrified of sleeves.
They're what? They're dead easy to put in?
No, some people are. Some sleeves are quite difficult to put in, but this is a very easy one, so that's good.
Okay. So see, I'm looking at the top of the pattern.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. So yeah, there's only one notch on that side, and then there's two on the other.
That's right. Two in the back, one in the front.
Just trying to follow the pattern, like the top there.
Okay, so that would be pinned in. If I was putting a sleeve in, I would then just stitch along this side, and then I believe they want me to overlock it as well. Yep, so 1 centimetre, stitching along there and overlock it, and then it would give you, I'll turn this out so you can see.
Yeah. Sleeve.
That would give you a wee sleeve.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to take this off, but I will talk about it later on.
Yeah. And would you just stitch it after that then, or would you come later on?
Stitch that now. You would stitch it with 1 centimetre and then overlock it. Bit.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So if you were doing your sleeve would be stitched on both sides at this point. And all you would do, the diagram's really good actually, but I'm going to be stitching this side seam here. If you've got the sleeve, it just means you're starting at the kind of cuff and you'll be stitching all the way around and all the way down to, there's a, they call it a drill mark. So there's a mark that I've got on my pattern here. And that's what I'm going to stitch to on that side. So on my right side, as I'm looking at it, I'm going to stitch to that drill mark, and then on my left side, I'm going to stitch all the way down to the bottom. So doing a reverse at the start and at the end, and then overlocking. So this side, I'll be able to overlock the two edges together. This side, I'll need to overlock them individually because these bits aren't getting stitched together. So you might even want to overlock or zigzag them right now before you stitch them to make it easier to zigzagging. Not as difficult to do if you've got two seams already stuck together. Overlocker can be quite tricky because it cuts, so it might cut a bit off by accident. So yeah, perhaps zigzag or overlock these bits first and then stitch them together with a wee straight stitch. I think that's what I'm going to do. I'll show you what I mean in a minute.
I'll get there. Is that your overlooker?
It is indeed.
Sounds like a coffee machine there. This is fun. Don't know why I don't do more.
No, I think everyone's kind of feeling the same. They're like, oh, I should have been doing this sort of thing all the time.
Basically.
We should have been doing online classes a long time ago, to be fair.
Like so,
Yeah.
So the kind of part of you is kind of, it's giving you a push.
Yeah, definitely has. Okay, so I've overlocked this edge and now I'm just going to stitch it from.
So why a gap there?
There's a gap, yeah, there's a gap for the tie to go in later.
Ah, right, okay. I was wondering.
Okay, so got this wee bit done. We've got this wee bit done and all overlocked. Now, all we want to do is the part where we've left this wee space, we're going to turn it out to our right side. And what we want to do is have this seam allowance tucked under. You can give it a press if you want. And this bit of seam allowance tucked under too. And then we're going to top stitch this. And top stitching is just stitching that goes through that you see on the outside, that goes through all the layers. So we kind of want to top stitch this seam allowance so that it stays put and doesn't flap about in there. Like that side there. So it'll just be stitching, probably going to have to go about 5mm from my folded edge here. So I'm going to stitch up, keep my needle in, lift my presser foot, which allows me to swivel and keep my place, and then I go across there, and then I'll come down that side and do a wee reverse. Does that make sense?
Yeah, show again. Just
I'll show you. Come closer.
Come to me.
Okay. So if you've got this linen-y stuff, you can kind of press it a bit like cardboard. You're pressing it in by the 1cm seam allowance. And then I will be stitching 5mm in from my folded edge here. So I'll be stitching about there. I'm going to stitch up. I'm going to put my needle in my fabric and lift my presser foot, which will keep my needle in and allow me to swivel. And then I go across, needle in, lift my presser foot, and then I'll come down.
Okay.
Here. So it'll just look like a wee box of stitching around that, which will just hold my seam allowance down.
I understand now.
Fab. Needle in, lift my presser foot, changing direction. Come across here, needle in, lift my presser foot, change direction again.
Swivel it round.
Swivel it round. I can start trying stuff on as well.
Yeah. Just like. So what size is that then?
This is their 8.
Right, okay. How's it feeling? And that's over a t-shirt as well.
Yeah. Here.
Pretty good. Looks a lot better than mine.
Sure, true.
I'll just be proud of it, regardless. I'll be like,
it'll be really nice when you dye it as well. Okay. Next bit is to grab your trouser bit, so I'm going to go and grab them and take the paper off them.
what's bias binding again to tidy it up?
Oh, did you notice that the bias binding piece asked you to cut it funny? I wonder if you've cut that piece yet. Hold on. This wee thin bit.
No.
Is.
No, I've got it, but yeah. Oh, I did that. Yeah.
Right, so what that means is, so your grain line always runs parallel to the selvage of the fabric. So they want you to put this like that kind of angle on your fabric because
funny.
like sideways, because it
Yeah.
gives it a bit of stretch, which then, so bias binding is just a strip of fabric cut on the bias of the fabric, so the bias grain. It gives it a bit of stretch, which means it's good for edging things and going round curves without it all wrinkling up. If you cut a straight bit on the straight grain, you'll find that it doesn't actually like to go around corners and doesn't behave itself. So that's why you can actually buy it as well. You don't have to use it, but it's quite nice to have the self-coloured stuff so it matches.
Right, okay.
But that is a good question.
Yes, thanks. All in time frame here, but it's fine.
Right, I've got the back, the two back pieces here, or the leg pieces, the back pieces. And again, these have a very similar pleat in them, like the top bits did. So I've got two notches here, and this is my right side. I'm going to bring these together. So the pleats are done in exactly the same way, matching those notches there. I'm going to stick a wee pin in. And then it's going again towards my side seam, which is this seam here. So I'm going to pushing it that way, sticking a wee pin in, and that is going to get basted again along there. So I'll do the same on this side. I'll just fold that back. Then I'm just going to stitch over this edge here, about 5 millimeters from my edge.
Oh, does that mute me when you're recording?
No, I muted you because right, I mute people all the time. It's because if it's recording and I'm showing something, it'll record whoever's it thinks is talking, so it would go to you rather than me. So that's only normally when I'm explaining something, I'm talking anyway, so it just always stays on me. But okay, there are my two, so these are my back leg pieces. So I'm going to do exactly the same with my front leg pieces because they've got a wee pleat at the top as well. That's those ones done. Just going to run them through the machine. Okay, so next bit is grab one of your front trouser pieces. Here's the pleat. Here's a bit of a weird shape, but that's where the pocket is. So grab one of your pocket bag, is that what they call it? Pocket bag piece, I think it is. Yes, it is. Which has a corresponding diagonal edge here. So this edge, these are going right sides together. I put a wee cross on my my wrong side because they are the right side and wrong side. There's no way to differentiate between the two. So this diagonal edge goes on top here, and I'm going to stitch this with a 1 centimetre seam allowance again. So same again, 1 centimetre, stitch it, run it through the overlocker, and then we'll need your iron after that, so you might want to plug your iron in.
Everything's 1 centimetre, yeah?
Yep.
Okay.
I think everything is 1 centimetre. Yes, everything is 1 centimetre.
Okay.
Okay, so I've stitched this bit on and I have overlocked that raw edge as well. The next thing it wants me to do is understitching. Now, understitching is when you stitch through a lining and a seam allowance. So this is a pocket, so it's kind of a lining. But I've pushed my seam allowance that way, folding my pocket back. I'm going to give this a press, and then I'll be stitching to the right of this seam here. So I'm not stitching through my outside trouser. I'm only stitching through the pocket bag and the seam allowance, which is obviously on that side there. So that's your next step. Your stitching should be a couple of millimeters from the seam, so you're not too far away from the seam. Okay, so I've done my understitching here. So that's now sitting nice and flat. So this is my right side, that's the right side of my pocket. Fold your pocket bag back on itself, like this. Now I'm matching these corners here because this is the edge I'm going to be stitching. This is the bottom of the pocket. So I'm going to pop that on top. I'm going to pop some pins along this edge and I'm going to stitch along here again with my 1 centimetre seam allowance. Okay, so now we've got this. I'm going to just stitch along here and I'm going to just overlock this edge as well. Okay, so this bottom edge of the pocket is done. Now we want to flip this behind the trouser. So I'm going to just flip it like that. I'm going to do that again because I think that might be a little bit confusing. So it's there, and then I'm just going to flip it so it sits behind. And then you can see this now looks like a normal kind of trouser side seam shape, which is what we want. And this seam here is where we want to do a wee stitch. So this is a wee basting stitch really, because We don't want to see this stitch on the outside, so we want to be within the seam allowance. I'd say you want to be 5 millimeters in. We're going to stitch all the way down here. So we're going through a good couple of layers of fabric here. I'll show you. Stick some pins in first. So I've got 2 layers of fabric that came from my pocket bag and then my outer trouser fabric. So we're going to stitch along there, and then we're also going to stitch along this top edge as well. So there's a notch there, match them up, and we've got a whole bit here that needs to be secured. So stitch along there and stitch along that edge as well, and that will secure your pocket. Okay, so the pocket's done. Looks like a pocket, which is always quite exciting. I've stitched it, secured it at the top, and I've secured it at the bottom within the seam allowance. So I've only gone 5 millimeters in here and here. The next step then, it wants us to stitch our front trouser piece to our back trouser piece using the side seam and the inside leg seam as well. So find the correct back trouser piece here. So these are going right sides together. I'm going to set this on top here. And I'm going to be pinning and stitching all the way down this side seam. Matching any notches. There's a notch just at that pocket there, all the way down. So I'm going to pin that just now actually to keep that in place. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same on my inside leg. Now, this curvy bit, we're just ignoring, because that's like our crotch seam. Just leave that, but you're going from this wee pointy bit here, matching these up. One thing that I hear a lot with trousers is, oh, these don't fit, because if you lay them flat, you can see that they go, you would think that they've gone wonky, but your front and your back pieces are a different shape, so they should not sit flat and work out. So just move this seam and match it to that one there. So pin, stitch with a 1 centimetre seam allowance, and then overlock or zigzag again, and then do the same to the other trouser front and back piece. Okay, so we've done the trouser, both our trousers, our right and our left. Now, what you want to do now is turn, I actually just turned this out and tried it on one leg to see what it looked like, because that's what I do. I just like try it on at every bit. But you want one to still be inside out. So I've got one inside out here. I've got one trouser leg that is the right way out. Put the one that's the right way out inside the one that is inside out. So I'm just going to grab this. Here's my inside out one. I'm going to put it inside. And then I'm going to match my crotch seam. So what this allows us to to do is put our two trousers right sides together. And we can match this seam. Give it a wee shake. Okay. So it wants me to stitch from, there's a dot on this pattern here. So I've got a dot here. So I'm going to stitch from that dot all the way under through our two seams here, our two inside leg seams. I'm going to keep going until I get right to the back there, and then this will make it into a pair of trousers. 1 centimetre seam allowance again, and does it want us to zigzag it? I can't remember. Yes, it does. It only wants us to overlock a little bit though, so I'll come back to that. Right, so I've done my trousers and I've turned them out and they look like trousers, which is nice. Overlocking wise, I overlocked the back just until I didn't go as far as the inside leg seam, so I just overlocked a wee bit, and it's because later on we overlock this and another bit at the same time, so just either overlock none of that inside seam, or in fact no, you want to overlock a little bit of it. Stop just before those two seams meet there, or zigzag obviously. Then turn them out to the right side and grab your top, which is here, and we're going to match the, so here's my top bit here. I'm now going to match this bottom edge to the top edge of my trousers with the pieces right sides together. So my trousers are the right side out. I'm going to put this right side down on top. There's a notch here that I'm going to match first of all. So right sides together and raw edges together. And I'm going to pin all the way around. So I'm going to be matching my notches and matching my side seams as I go. Now, in theory, your two pleats should match here as well. So you've got the pleat from the top and the pleat from the bottom. So maybe match them up as well. And then match those notches at the back as well. Okay. Okay, so at this bit here, obviously we've got this open part that we made. These have to sit nice and snug together like that. So I'm going to match my folded edge to my side seam there. And then this folded edge, I'm going to set it right next to it so that there's no space there. I'll be stitching over that. So 1 centimetre stitching all the way around. All right, so I've put the top and the bottom together. So it's starting to look like a garment, which is nice. The next step is put this to one side and grab your tie. So your tie gets folded right sides together like that. And we're going to stitch along this long edge. Now, it tells us when we get to the other end here, I'll just pin this quickly. It tells us not to stitch down this end and not to close it off, and I think it's probably because it makes it easier to turn out. However, you would then have to top stitch this, so I am going to come right along this edge and then I'm going to come down here, and obviously I'm going to leave this wee diagonal edge open. So 1 centimetre again, and I would, do they tell you to? They don't tell you to overlock or zigzag this edge, but I'm going to, and I'm going to do the same on my other tie as well. Okay, I've got my ties here and I'm going to turn them out. Before I turn them out, I'm going to just snip my seam allowance ever so slightly at this corner here. So about 1 millimetre away. It'll just mean I'll have a nice sharp point from there. And then to turn this out, you can just do this with it and turn it out like this. And then it'll take a wee while, but you can pull it out that way until it's out to the right side. Or if you've got one of these guys, which is a loop turner, you can use it. It's got a wee hook on the end, so it goes right in. And then you can hook it, if you can feel the hook, hook it onto like a stitch or a bit of the fabric at the end here. And then you should be able to pull it. Once you get it started, it's a bit easier. There we go. and then just pull out this end so that it's square. I sometimes use a pin for this actually. So you can kind of grab the fibres of the fabric and pull it out. And then the same on the other one. And then fix this wee end as well. And if you want, you can give it a wee press. And then just grab your bias binding for the next bit. I know I told you to get your bias binding, but grab the jumpsuit and grab your ties because we're going to attach these first. So here in the jumpsuit, I am looking at the, let me see if this makes it easier to see. I've got the right side up, back, sorry, wrong side up. It'll be around that way. So this is my front curvy edge, and this tie is going, cut this off. Like that. Make sure, so it says to match the curve, this edge here against this edge here, and your right side of your tie to wrong side of your fabric. I think it should probably go, it must be that way. Yeah. I just want to turn this out and make sure that it is the right way. Yes. So the tie should kind of flow down with the neckline, and it's obviously going to be tying around your waist, so it has to be going in that kind of direction there. So you want to pin that on and stitch that in. And then we're on to your bias binding, which I can talk you through. So your bias binding has a little bit of give on it. And I had to cut several bits because I ran out of fabric, but you should only have 2 bits that you have to attach. And to attach them, I've lost a bit somewhere. There we go. So you take a piece of your bias binding, set it down in front of you, right side up, and then you take your other piece and it's going to go right side down, so these will be right sides together. Put them together at an angle like that, and then we'll be stitching at a diagonal. So if I pop some pins in, 1 and 2, then you can see when that's stitched, that's going to make a nice straight bit of bias binding, and that's what we want. So stitch that, and then give yourself a 1 centimetre allowance and snip that excess off. So I'll show you on this one. So this one I've already stitched, It's looking nice on that side. Now I'm going to just take the excess off. Like that. And then we're ready to use this. Okay, on to the binding. Now, I stitched the binding together, and now all I've done is I've folded it. Now, if you've used shop bought bias binding before, you'll know the shape, but I just folded it in the two raw edges into the centre, and then I folded it in half and gave it a press. And you want to do that all the way along. And basically, we just want to, we're going to be enclosing our raw edges in this little bit of bias binding so that we've got a nice folded edge on the outside. We want to start. This is the front trouser bit, and this is that wee dot that we stitched to before, and this is where we're going to start. So I'm going to just wrap this around my raw edge like that. Now, there is another way to do bias binding where you might want to do it this way. I'll show you two ways. One way is you just, if this is the edge of your fabric, you just wrap the bias binding around it and then you stitch all over the top, which is what this pattern suggests that you do. Like that. Or what you can do is you can open it up and you can have the raw edge of the bias binding against the raw edge of your jumpsuit here. You can stitch in this crease. So this would be working, this was the right side of my bias binding to the wrong side of my jumpsuit at this point. So you can do that, and then once that's stitched in, you can then turn it and fold it over and top stitch it. So you get a very similar look. This way takes longer, but it's probably more precise. And this way is quicker. So it's up to you what way you want to go. That goes all the way around your neckline and down the other side, and you'll finish next to where you started. And if you haven't done the sleeves, like I haven't, so I've got the sleeveless version here, then you also want to stick some bias binding on this raw edge. And then after that, all you have to do to finish up is hem the bottom of your jumpsuit. And then the only step after that is to put it on, see how amazing it is, take a photo, and then tag us on Instagram, obviously. So that's So Confident. Let us know how you get on. If you've got any questions about anything, or you want to send me some photos of your finished items, please do. It would be really nice to see them. And I hope this has all made sense. Let us know how you get on. Thank you.